Today we're making Tonkotso style ramen. It's my favorite type of ramen, and we're going to be making Chashu in this. We're going to be making the pork broth. We're going to be making a Tare, and we're going to be making Menma, which is bamboo shoots. There's timestamps if you want to skip ahead. And we're going to be starting off with the porkbelly here, and simply to cut off the skin and to cut off the fat. And the calories for this dish are an estimation. I long wondered how many calories it actually is in the Tonkotso style broth, and it's quite difficult to actually measure. But what I did is that I let the broth cool down and actually sat and removed all of those little pieces of fat that floated up from the broth and weighed them to get an estimation. And what we ended up with was 980 calories in one portion, with 34 grams of protein, 67 grams of carbs, and 66 grams of fat. And we're going to be starting off by making our pork belly, or our chashu. And we're going to be cutting off the skin and as much fat as possible, otherwise you're going to have a whole lot of more calories in this. Then we're going to try to roll this and then tie it up with a string. It's a good idea to have more string than you think you needed, but I'd run out, so this is all I had to work with. But use more than you think is necessary. That usually makes it a bit easier. And exactly how you do this doesn't really matter. Just try to keep it fairly tight. And then we're gonna tie it in a knot. And we're gonna be weighing this before and after as usual. And we're gonna be using 2.5 deciliters of water, 0.75 deciliters of soy sauce, and it's a good idea to use Japanese soy sauce if you can find it. It's quite different from the Chinese ones. And we're also going to be using 0.25 deciliters of mirin. Then we're going to add 5 cloves of garlic, which we're going to peel and crush and put in our pot. To that we're also going to be adding 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. Then we're going to put our lid on and place this on the stove and bring it to a boil. And this is going to simmer for roughly 2 hours. Doesn't really matter if it's not fully covered. And we're simply going to flip this every half an hour until we had it on a light simmer for 2 hours. After that, we're going to place that on a wire rack in order for it to dry. If it's very wet when you place it in the oven, it's a good idea to wipe it off with a paper towel. Then we're going to put our oven on 225 degrees. And we're going to be putting this in the oven for 15 to 30 minutes. It depends on how crispy you want it. And since we removed most of the fat, it's not going to crisp up as much as it possibly could. But as usual, if you want anything to taste better, use more fat and salt. But then you're going to increase the calorie amount as well. So, as you can see, it's quite dry, and we're going to be putting this in the oven, and 15 minutes was enough for me. Then it started to crisp up, but wasn't really burned yet. So 15 minutes was perfect. And I did this the day before as well, because if you allow the chashu to cool down, it's much easier to cut thinly. So placing this in the fridge overnight is a good idea. And for it not to totally dry up, I like to put a couple of tablespoons of our braising liquid in the plastic bag and then just leave it in the fridge overnight. And we lost roughly 40% of the weight. So if you cut 65 grams of our chashu, that means that it's 100 grams uncooked that you want to add to your calorie count. That means that we're almost done with our chashu, and it's time for us to make our Tonkotso broth. Now for our Tonkotso broth, we're going to be using pork trotters and pork bones, and it's a good idea to weigh them before you cook them, because we want to use twice the amount of water for the amount of pork broth. So if you're using 1,700 grams of pork bones and trotters, we want twice that amount of water. But first of all, we're going to be putting our trotters and bones in a pot and fill that with water and then put it in the fridge overnight, because we want to remove some of that blood. Next morning here, we're going to simply remove all of that water, fill it up again, and then put that on the stove and bring it to boil. And we're doing this because we want to remove more blood and more gunk in order to get a clean white broth in the end. And as you can see, when this is started to heat up, some of that blood actually starts to come out. After a while, it's going to heat up and all of that gunk and blood is going to flow to the top, which we want to remove. And it's a good idea to give this a stir, because then more of that will come out on its own. And you know that you're done with this step when nothing more rises to the top. This means that we're almost ready to actually put this on the stove to get it boiling. However, we don't want to use this water. We want to drain this water, and then we want to clean the trotters and bones as much as possible. So remove the water, pour some cold water on them so that you're actually able to touch them without burning yourself. And then just give every part a rinse and remove some of that gunk that's still remaining and our first step didn't remove. It's usually quite a bit as well. And as I said, twice the amount of water for the weight in bones. So roughly 1500 grams of trotters and bones means 3 liters of water. And then simply bring that to boil. It's also a good idea, we're going to be boiling this for roughly 8 hours. So it's a good idea to have something to measure with, so you know that the amount of liquid remains roughly the same, because we're going to be needing to top this off. And the Japanese have developed a lot of peak extraction times for this. From what I read, it's a good idea to let the broth boil for at least 8 hours. And when 7 hours are done, we're going to be adding 1 knob of ginger, 1 onion, and some spring onions as well. However, we don't want to add that for the first 7 hours, and that's again according to the Japanese that have charts and tables of peak extraction times. So I trust that. And 7 hours, with 1 hour remaining, we're going to be adding the ginger, onion, spring onions and garlic. And as you can see, it's starting to actually become white and clear. So we're almost getting there. And this means that we're in our last hour. So simply boil that for another hour. And as you can see here, we have lost quite a large amount of water, so we need to top that off and add some more water. And then we're going to bring that up to boil again. And when we're done with that, you need to remove all of those bone parts, the onions and the ginger and everything, and then pour the remainder liquid through a sieve, because we're going to have quite a lot of loose particles in this. This for me yielded 7 portions, that's 3 deciliters each. So you get quite a lot, and you can easily put this in the freezer for a couple of months without it becoming bad. So when we sieve this, our broth is almost done. All we need to do then is to divide it into portion sizes, and as I said, I use 3 deciliters for this. And as I said, I put 50 grams of broth in a glass. I let that cool down, and then simply sat and tried to remove all of those pieces of fat that float to the top, and I got around 6 grams of fat, meaning that it's 12 grams per deciliter of fat. Now it's time to make our tare, and I'm making a soy-based tare, so if you want that super clear white broth, then you should probably do a salt-based tare. This is gonna make your broth a bit darker, but I think it works well with the broth otherwise. So we're gonna be using 25 grams of kombu, 25 grams of dried shiitake mushrooms, and 5 deciliters of soy sauce. And simply pour the soy sauce over the mushrooms and kombu and put that in the fridge overnight as well. Next day we're simply gonna be taking that out and bring it to a boil. Just put it on the stove and bring it up to a boil. And when it's just started boiling, all we need to do is remove it from the heat and just drain it. And that's our easy to make tare. This you can keep in the fridge for a couple of months as well. I've had mine in the fridge for roughly 3 months and it's still fine. I don't know what's the end of life of this tare is, but it's a lot of salt, so it should be fine for a while. Next up is our eggs. If you find that your eggs break when you put them in the boiling water, just poke a hole with them in the needle in the bottom, and that should be fine. I like to boil mine for 6.5 minutes for very loose eggs, 7 minutes for not as loose eggs. Then just rinse them in cold water, no need for the ice water or anything, just cold water is fine. And then I like to peel them with a teaspoon, which is fantastic and works very well. So all you need to do is just peel the bottom, run it through some cold water, and then simply use a teaspoon to peel the rest, and it's so easy, it's wonderful. And simply move it around until the egg's shell is removed from the egg. If you haven't tried it, I suggest you do. It makes peeling eggs so much easier. And next we're gonna be marinating this. I find that roughly 2 or 3 hours is enough. And this marinade is gonna be 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. I ran out of my Japanese soy sauce, so I'm using 1 tablespoon light soy sauce, Chinese style, and 1 tablespoon of dark soy sauce. We're also gonna be using 1 tablespoon of mirin and a couple of cloves of garlic, roughly 3. And that's all you need to do. Just seal the bag, put it on a plate because the bags usually leak, and then in the fridge for 2 to 3 hours. Next up is Menma, which is one of my favorite ramen toppings. That's basically bamboo shoots that we're going to be cooking in 1 teaspoon of toasted sesame oil, and then we're going to be adding 1 deciliter of water to a bowl and adding 1 tablespoon of chicken stock, and then simply 1 can of bamboo shoots. And we're going to be searing them in the sesame oil for a little while. You don't need to do that for a long time, just simply 1 or 2 minutes. And after that we are going to be adding our water and chicken broth. And then we're going to be adding 2 teaspoons of soy sauce and 2 teaspoons of mirin. And if you haven't tried this, I suggest you do, because it's really easy and it's wonderful. They're so nice. So all we need to do after that is simply give this a stir and then reduce the liquid until there's basically nothing left. And when we're at that step, what we want to do is add some chili oil, like the Layu oil. which you usually can find in any Asian grocery store. Just a few drops of that oil, it's basically chili and sesame oil, and I used 1.25 grams, but just a few drops is fine. Now we're actually at assembly time. We made our chashu, we made our tare, we made our menma, we made an egg. So now we're going to be cutting up our chashu, and I like to slice it as thinly as possible. As I said, 65 grams of this is 100 grams of uncooked pork belly, which is roughly 3 thin slices. Then we're going to be chopping up all of toppings so everything's ready. So a few spring onions, give them a chop, and pour 1 tablespoon of tare in the bottom of the bowl. The noodles I have were pre-packed at 90 grams, so we're using 90 grams of noodles. And then we're going to be burning our chashu, which makes everything smell amazing. And then all we need to do is pour 3 deciliters of our stock in our bowl. Then we want to add our noodles and our chashu, our menma, and our egg, and some spring onions. If you don't like the soy-based tare, just send me a message and I'll send you a recipe for a salt-based tare instead. So that's it. It takes quite a while to make, but it's a fantastic dish in my opinion. This is the final dish for my vacation cooking. So next week we're gonna be back with making some classic meal prep for those of you who made it this far. If you did, I appreciate it, and I hope you try it, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching.